In your previous classes, you learned a lot about quadratics. I'm going to give you a quick refresher over what quadratics are, and then show you a couple of new things that you know about them. Starting off with quadratics is anything that is x squared. Okay, if that's the highest exponent in the problem, then that is a quadratic equation. So x squared is the most basic one. Then we have things like 3x squared, or maybe 4x squared minus 2x plus 2. All of those are quadratic equations. As you can see, the highest exponent in each one of these is going to be 2. Now, the things that you know about the graph currently. The graph of a quadratic is what's called a parabola. And parabolas graph like U's, so they're U-shaped. And the way that we tell the solutions to a quadratic equation are x-intercepts. So x-intercepts are our real solutions. Okay? And the key word here being real, because we're going to stress the other aspect of this in just a little bit. So, real solutions. Now, so a graph of a quadratic could look something like that. And you can see the solutions, or the x-intercepts, are right there. So the graph of this quadratic would have 2 real solutions. Okay? And then we can also take the same graph of a quadratic, flip it upside down, and it's still a quadratic, it's just a negative quadratic. You can see that it still has 2 solutions at where the x-axis are. So both this equation and this one both have 2 real solutions, or 2 real zeros. Okay? Now, another way that we can look at a quadratic is what happens if our quadratic does something like this. So it goes down, it touches the axis, and goes back up. Alright, so this is one of the scenarios where you can see that it does not have 2 solutions. It actually only crosses the axis in one location. Right? And that one location is the place that we have a 0, so it's one x-intercept, and since it has one x-intercept, it is one real solution. And then, of course, if I turn the graph upside down, maybe we stick it over here this time, right there, same type deal. One x-intercept, one real solution. So you've seen all of that in the prior classes and know a lot about quadratics that look like that. But here's my question. What happens when we graph a quadratic and it turns out like that? Well, the arrows means that it continues to go up and up and up, so it never turns and comes back down. So we know that it never has any x-intercepts, so 0 x-intercepts, which means we have 0 real solutions. Okay, so if we have 0 real solutions, then what are our solutions to this graph? So this is where we have something called imaginary solutions. Okay, and it's actually going to be 2 imaginary solutions. We'll cover that later on when we get into polynomial functions and the characteristics of polynomial functions. But for right now, just say that, hey, this thing has 2 imaginary solutions. Okay, so a quadratic graph, which is a parabola that does not cross the x-axis, has 2 imaginary solutions. Please be very, very careful when you're trying to sketch these graphs that you do not do something like this and say, hey, it doesn't have any x-intercepts, so therefore it has 0 real solutions and has 2 imaginary solutions. Well, that's not actually the case. If you carry this graph on down through here, then you can see that, hey, it will cross the x-axis right there and right there. So this actually has two real solutions. Okay, so please be very careful when you're trying to sketch those graphs. So that's all I have for right now. What I would like for you to do is hit the pause button and do problems number 1 through 4 on your worksheet. Alright, hopefully you've had the time to do problems 1 through 4 at this point. If not, again, hit the pause button and go ahead and do that. So now looking at these questions. Question number 1 asks you to draw a graph that has two real solutions. So you should have drawn a graph that has two x-intercepts. Maybe your graph looks like that. Maybe your graph looks something like that. Either one of these are both acceptable answers. All I'm looking for is that it's crossing the x-axis 2 times. Question number 2 asks for a graph that has exactly one solution. Well, this would be the case where we draw a graph and the vertex of the quadratic function is on the graph. Okay, so the vertex needs to be on the x-axis. It's probably a very important thing that you need to write down. If we have one solution, the vertex is on the x-axis. Maybe it looks like that again. You could have went over here and drawn it, but looking for one of these scenarios. Number 3 is what this unit's all about. Draw a graph that has 0 real solutions, which means it has 0 x-intercepts. So your graph should be up here going up or below the axis going down. Please be careful of not to draw a graph like this and say, hey, it has no real solutions, because that's not the case, because again, it continues to go down. So this would actually be an incorrect solution for number 3. Either of these will work, or you can move them around wherever you would like. And then number 4 asks you, if it does not cross the x-axis, what kind of solutions? There are imaginary solutions. And there are 2 of them. Okay, we talked about that earlier, and we'll go into more depth as we move into polynomial functions. If you have any questions at this time or really don't understand what's going on, please raise your hand at this time and ask your teacher.